Okay, one of the most contentious arguments by the FKR is that Higgins and Alberts had phone calls in the middle of the night, and Brian Albert says it was probably a butt dial. And I think they both know exactly what happened. They just didn't testify truthfully because it was a meaningless thing that happened in the middle of the night. And here's my theory what happened. We all know that Karen and Higgins were texting, behind John O'Keefe's back. And Higgins was like, is she playing me or what? Is she trying to make John jealous? He's really trying to figure out if John is out of the picture. It's like, bros before hoes. He doesn't want to move on Karen unless John's out of the way. So there's skepticism in that texting messages. So on the day of the accident, they all go to New York City for the funeral. And they all come back to Boston from New York. I think one of the Alberts brothers or somebody drove. Anyway, they're back near Canton, and Brian Albert's talking to Brian Higgins. Hey, I'm thinking about heading over to the hillside for some drinks and some, something, maybe dinner. And Higgins goes, okay, I'm going to go switch the car at the Canton PD, and I'll meet you, whatever. So, or he just said, I'm going to go switch my car. And then Brian Albert calls Higgins, says, hey, I decided to go to the hillside for some drinks and dinner. You want to join me? And Higgins goes, yeah, sure. I'm at Canton. I'm, switching out the cars. I'll meet you there for some drinks. And that's the last phone call that Brian Albert makes on his phone. Now, he probably has a smartphone. I'm old school. I have a flip phone because it fits in my pocket. So they go to the hillside and they're having drinks, and Brian Albert goes, hey, I'm going now to the waterfall because we're celebrating my son's birthday. You want to join us? And Higgins is like, nah, I think I'll just hang out here at the hillside and finish my drink, and then I have to go to Canton and move the cars in the parking lot because the big snowstorm tonight. And so he goes, I'll just catch you later. So, okay. So at the hillside, Higgins goes, you know what? I want one more drink. So I'll go to the waterfall. So he goes to the waterfall, and then he's there talking to everybody. And then who walks in? John and Karen. And now Higgins is like, oh, okay, it's getting interesting. Here's Karen, the girl that's been texting me and flirting with me, and now it's interesting. It's like, okay, this is kind of good. And then they're going through the whole evening, and about she's ghosting him. She won't, talk to him. He texted her, well. And then there's talk about going to an after party, and John and Karen said they'll go. So Higgins is like, okay, I'm going to go so I can still keep an eye on Karen. So they all go, to the Alberts. Higgins was there first. He plowed the driveway and yada, yada. And John and Karen are last to arrive. And we know the story. And even Higgins texted John like, hey, are you coming in? And he doesn't want to see John. He wants to see Karen squirm around him. It's like, how is she going to avoid him? How is she going to treat him? And then when they don't come in the house, and Higgins goes, okay, shoot, all right, it's the fun's over. So he decides to leave first, and he goes to Canton to swap the cars. What he was supposed to do. He doesn't want to leave the cars in the snow during the snowstorm. So Higgins goes home. He said he had at least a drink, and he's probably like, oh, well, that was a fun evening. So he had a drink. He's getting a little more drunk, and then he goes to bed. And meanwhile, at the Alberts' house, the Alberts, Brian and Nicole, they're feeling a little amorphous, so they start having sex. And Brian Albert says he leaves his phone in the bed, and Face ID turns on, opens the phone because his face is looking at the phone, and he accidentally hit the redial button because as a man, you don't make any phone calls. So the last phone call was to Higgins. So he's having sex and he hit the redial accidentally, not realizing he made a phone call, but there it is. They're having sex and there's a phone call and it rings Higgins' phone at home. Higgins is in his bed and he's like, oh shit, phone rings, and he's like, oh fuck it. He just sleeps right through it and he starts thinking, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's Karen. Maybe her and John had a fight and now she wants to come over and says, it's over. John and I are over. Like, let's bang. And so Higgins wakes up, okay, maybe this is it. So he goes and he looks at the phone. Oh shit. It's Brian Albert. What the fuck is he calling me for? All right, let me find out what he's... So he calls Brian Albert back. Meanwhile, they're in the middle of having sex. I'm really happy if Brian Albert can go that long. But they're still in the middle of sex, and the phone rings. And Brian Albert's like, shit! And he goes to swipe right, but the phone is upside, or whatever, however the swipe works. And instead of swiping right, he swept left, and it answered the phone. And so here's Higgins on the phone. Oh, shit. They're having sex. Oh. And he listens for like 40 seconds. Oh. He's like... And then he goes, okay. So he hangs up, goes to bed. The next day, after everything happens, Brian Albert goes to Higgins. I might have called you last night. Did I call you last night? Looking at my phone, and Higgins goes, I don't know. He's like, I don't know. I don't want to tell them I heard them having sex. So Higgins is like, no, I don't remember any phone calls last night. It's like, I don't want to admit that I listened for 40 seconds of you banging Nicole. It's like, so anyway, that is my whole theory on what the butt dials were all about. No conspiracy to move John or move his body or yada, yada, yada.